Hello, everyone. Hope it was a good break, and the refreshments were great. I like to introduce myself as somebody who has fun making meaning out of data. And that's pretty much been my career in various ways. And today, I start with solemn thoughts that Kathy was talking about, which is how we use data and the ethical implications of that. So that's very much on our minds and thought-provoking. And of course, to follow Kathy and Shrikant is a challenge, so I'll make mine brief. And then towards the end, I will invite up Joe Keating from Hills to have a chat with us about how his organization is using analytics and where his journey is taking him, learnings, implications, insights, all of that. So today, I wanted to talk to you. As I said, I'm a practitioner. I like making meaning out of data. So I thought it'll be fun to talk about two things that we are working on and actively working with our clients on, where we are using analytics, AI, and data, and using vast amounts of data to be able to make some meaningful decisions for our clients. Interestingly, all of the data comes to us at a very high speed, and the decisions need to be made at that speed to realize the ROI. So it is, in all the glory of AI, it is also equally important to think of the speed at which our clients can make decisions, and therefore it becomes meaningful to them. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was a social chatter and how you can inform brand strategy by decoding consumer chatter. So as marketers, all of us often talk about putting the consumer at the center. Traditionally, we have asked consumers what they think about any number of things, and we have taken that to inform our brand strategy. This is sort of the next paradigm where instead of asking them, we are observing them, we are looking at what they're saying when unsolicited, right? And we're using that to say, does that lead us to a different direction in our brand strategy? Does that lead us to a different direction in how we innovate for our consumers and therefore delight them even more? Finally, it also helps us think through, is there a new frontier that we are not necessarily seeing in our everyday sales data that might be there? One thing it doesn't do, because we talk about all the great things that data can tell us, this data does not tell us perhaps of latent demand, which is another concept of how we think about 5 years out strategy. So that is an obvious thing I wanted to point out. And the pretext and the context of why we set about to do this, right? Of course, a large amount of data gets generated all the time, and a lot of this is social chatter. In fact, apparently all the data that's out there, most of it was created in the last 2 years, which is mind-boggling to me. This data, as we have found out, contains pretty valuable and voluntary information about consumers' needs, their attitudes, their opinions, their preferences. What are they saying about my brand? Whether they are even talking about my brand or they're always talking about some other brand. And it also needs, because of the sheer volume of data, sophisticated algorithms to filter, interpret, and decipher insights for brands and consumers. And I'm ever so grateful to the fantastic team of data scientists who work with us in Fractal to make sense of all this data. And the question is, can this lead to a better brand strategy? Can we use this usefully? And so this happens, right? So we talked a lot today about how do we process data, how do we make meaning out of it, what do algorithms do? So in order to make sense and decode social chatter to a useful purpose, which is to inform our brand strategy, what we need to do, obviously, is start with the data on the left-hand side of the chart, pre-process and clean one level for various aspects of social data, put that through a filtering mechanic, where not only are we looking at topics, but we are also using reinforcement from much later down in the line. So there is that aspect happening. Then put it through word to vec, LDA to vec kind of things. What are we doing essentially by looking at these algorithms here is to say, are there certain directions in which this chatter is going when I look at the context of my brands or categories or ancillary categories, right? So if I'm in a dish care category, are there certain aspects of that category that are emerging in this chatter? Is there a direction? Once you get a direction, then what we do is try to assign some weight, some importance to that direction to say, is this something that has a lot of volume in chatter, and is that growing? So as an example, in dish detergents, lemon fresh is a very common attribute. It gets a lot of chatter, but the chatter doesn't necessarily grow. So it just reinforces that, yes, that's a thing. It doesn't tell us that it's a growing thing that you need to pay pay attention to. So what we are trying to decipher, therefore, with this very complicated algorithm is what of all that chatter is meaningfully important to my brand strategy. Is there a flavor that's emerging? 5 years ago, was sriracha a thing that came up in chatter? Of course, yes. Gluten-free 7 or 8 years ago, was that a thing? Yes. What is the next thing? And this is sort of a million-dollar question that we are attempting to solve in the category context. Some interesting things. How do we know that it is correct, right? Whenever we come up with an algorithm, we need to understand if the algorithm is spitting out things that are meaningful or they're spitting out things that are not necessarily relevant. So one of the ways that we are looking at this is if we look at past history, do our models come up with things that actually became reality? So by looking at sales data, for example, you will see that there is a filter of OCR data which looks at online sales. We're also putting in not only social chatter, but things like when you go online shopping and you leave reviews, for example, on Amazon. We're bringing those in as well. We're doing a counter validation with Google search data and so forth to see if there is other interest other than social chatter. So all of that has come back with some very interesting results. So how do we know that there has been impact? So we have been able to do things like spot innovation, so emerging innovations in a category or in an ancillary category that could inform my brand strategy. The volume of chatter and the direction of chatter, so for example, positive versus negative sentiment about my brand, or no sentiment at all about my brand, versus emerging categories, emerging topics, can tell me where my brand stands. And for me, as a marketer, as a marketing consultant, this excites me very much because if I think about my previous life, we used to do a marketing assessment and look at a market structure of a category maybe every 5 years. And we did that by mostly asking people attitudinal preferences, right? What this tells me, I don't know if every 5 years it needs to be refreshed or does it change every 6 months? Do categories mesh with each other? And does the direction change dynamically almost every 6 months? My theory is that it changes more often than we give it credit for. Consumer attitudes and preferences change. And if I could use this data to be an input into how I think of the market structure, that would slowly start to replace things that people say when asked to what people voluntarily say. And that is the direction where we are going. So spot innovations, understand where I stand versus the other players in the category in terms of what consumers are saying about me. What does that mean about my equity, my brand health? What does that say about the market structure? So as an example, if 5 years ago or 10 years ago we looked at the cereal category, health was perhaps just to be able to have less sugar in your cereal. Now health could be to be able to have ingredients like spelt in your cereal. 6 months later, there might be another trend that comes up. Unless we spot the trend early enough, because of the R&D cycle that is involved in bringing a product to market, we will never be the first or the second to market. And that is the power of the algorithms that we are using here. It is real time. It feeds in data as often as we can feed it. And it can take the models in as often as we want to refresh. So every week, every day, you can look at what is a new thing that is coming up. Now, as things come up, there are further algorithms that also look at Is this a fad? Is this a real trend, right? And the more we can do that kind of calculation, we can say, is this a big thing that we go after in our brand strategy? Or is this a small niche thing that maybe we track, but we do not act upon? It's equally important to understand when to act, react, or not do anything at all, right? So that is the ultimate goal of this tool. So far, and we've only been doing this for about a year or so. So far, we have had quite a few success studies. So first of all, when we started out, we did not know that we would be able to clean the data, the volume of data that we get, and be able to spot real insights that are not obvious, right? So we were able to do that, and that process is automated. This is where data engineering comes in to a large extent, in addition to the AI algorithms that we wrote, because there are various and many different kinds of data that come in, including images, things people post on Instagram, so various kinds. Second, have we been able to uncover new segments for our clients? Yes. We've been able to also look at competitive segments and where they are going after and how that's resonating with consumers in the industry. So sort of tracking the market, uncover some niche needs. For example, one of the clients we were working with is very intense on flavors. And one of the new flavors coming up a lot in conversations, something called neroli, which is a natural ingredient. So they were able to incorporate that into their smaller innovation projects, for example. We've also been able to inform, therefore, the innovation pipeline that goes into R&D as people go and research ingredients. Third, the time that takes to get from insight to action and even to insights has been largely reduced. As one of our own clients has professed recently, when they historically used social listening, which was mainly answering the what, so what are the trends, right? Without saying whether it's important or not. They were either distracted or confusing the organization, whether it was a proper insight or trend or whether it was just comments, right? Now, using this new technique, they were able to spot real data-based insights automatically and much quicker. And they have been able to bring this into their planning process. So it has a lot of promise. I still think we are in the first phases of this discovery, so we come back next year. Hopefully, we'll have much more to reveal, but I'm personally very excited about the direction. So the second case I wanted to talk about is specifically a CPG case where we talk about emerging markets, a million stores in India, for example, that it has to be serviced by each CPG company, and how do we make that process more intelligent? And one aspect of this is to understand, for a small store which cannot stock every single product that we have to offer, what is the best product to stock? And how does a person do this efficiently? So we have created an algorithm as well as a way to deliver it to the person who is servicing the store. So by posing ourselves 3 questions: where to sell? So if I have one product, neroli-based air care spray, right? Where do I sell it? Which store is appropriate? And of all the 3 sizes that I have, which one do I push in what store? And once I do that, I'd make that decision. How much of that am I going to ship? Am I going to try to stock them 2 boxes every week, or 4 boxes every week, or maybe a much smaller quantity? So, which are all important questions. The decision today is either heuristically taken by the person servicing the store, or manufacturers will have what they call a must-sell list of SKUs, and they will go and try to fit that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to each store without differentiation, right? So what we want to create is, first of all, not all stores are created equal because of where they're located, because of their size, because of who shops there, who lives there, what kind of traffic it attracts, right? So let's look at the stores and cluster them by similarities on various dimensions. The second thing is, when we understand what to sell, is how you understand what sells in that store now, what ancillary products sell in that store now. So if you can take all of that information to understand what is the next SKU that we sell in that store. And then finally, some mathematical models to understand what has demand been historically, and therefore, what will demand be in the future, right? So 3 different modules to that. One part that I really wanted to talk to you today about was in the what to sell algorithm, we are using deep learning and method called RNN. And what we are feeding into it is a whole lot of information about each store, first of all, which we're describing a store as what are the store characteristics, large, small, everyday store, a larger store, maybe with a pharmacy included, maybe some fast food included or not. What are the SKU characteristics that we are trying to sell into the store? What are the existing store SKU characteristics? What is the matching there, for example? What are some of the things that vary over time? For example, holiday periods. For example, seasonality, depending on the category, right? And we're using an ensemble of neural networks to solve that so that we understand a ranking of what is the best SKU for that store, and then what is the next best SKU for that store, and so forth. We take into consideration what has been selling in the store, so forth. The best way, I come from the Nielsen world, and we always said the best way to describe a store, if you have nothing else, is what sells. You can make a lot of inference about a store by knowing what sells in that store. So that's a very important input that goes in there. When we look at similarities of stores, we look at what sells in there, what location there is, what demographics is. And then we capture seasonality as well, because the last part of it, where we are forecasting how much to sell, really depends on seasonality of the store. We have been able to implement this in various countries across large teams of people who go into the stores as sales representatives. What we have observed is that it creates real impact. And one of the ways we have created real impact is not only have we run this algorithm, but just like Shrikant was saying, we used design. So we served this up in Cuddle, in some handheld devices, think about it, where as you walk into a store, you will know what exactly to push in that store in terms of SKU. It also helps you backfill your supply chain in a much more efficient way as a result, right? So it gives a scalable mechanism to give direction to the sales representatives. Second, a muscle list for each store cluster, not for all stores, creating differentiation and efficiency. You can understand order quantity for each store, which backfills into your supply chain. For example, in a case study in India recently, we were able to impact 20,000 stores, which was just a pilot program. There are 1 million stores in India and growing. And we were able to, in those stores, see a revenue increase for that category by 5%, which is not small. So large, and we think if this prediction algorithms work well, it could be as high as 15% is our prediction. So we are just scratching the surface. I'm really excited because this is something that is so actionable. It is so close to where our clients are right now in terms of servicing stores, and it creates the right efficiencies for their organizations to increase their revenues.